Well, in their quest for Scottish independence, the Scottish National Party at first considered joining the euro, which is now very unpopular. Then they plumped for retaining the pound sterling, and now the British government, backed up by all three main Westminster parties, has said no. How far is this a major, even a terminal setback for the independence movement? And could Scotland go instead for its own currency, perhaps the Scottish dollar? It's a big moment, do you think, in this campaign?
It is a big moment. I mean, extraordinary in the context of British politics more generally to see such pugnacious politicians as the Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls and the Chancellor George Osborne coordinate together a message, the same message about the currency in relation to Scottish independence. I think it is a very important moment. But can I just preface it by saying that I think irrespective of what happens in the referendum, Scotland is going in its own way. It is so different from England. I go up and perform a political show at the Edinburgh Festival about British politics, and each time now I find I have to say, of course, what I'm saying doesn't affect any of you in Scotland. About 8 of the topics, you know, health, education, and all the other things are so separate. However, on this technical issue of the currency, Alex Salmond has no answer, literally no answer, because he insists that actually all this is bluster and that they will be able to keep the pound. That's not at all clear. It's not at all clear that it will be in the interests of either Scotland or England for them to keep this shared currency. Look what happens in the euro when you have a bank controlling interest rates of an independent country. But if he doesn't do that, they've ruled out the euro now for obvious reasons. There are huge problems with the Scottish currency. So I think on this technical issue, there are real problems for the independence case, this basic currency issue. The other issues, I think, are going his way in the broader debate, but not this one.
But you make a very important point, which, frankly, very few English commentators have ever made, which is that in its head, in many ways, Scotland is already independent. It's not formally independent, but on most of the big issues which affect people, the health service, how it's administered, the education service, even the churches, yeah. Scotland is different.
It's a different country. And all the key issues which have fascinated the Westminster-based coalition, who have been obsessed with radical reforms of public services, coincidentally, are the very issues over which Scotland has entirely separate powers and have moved in an entirely different direction. So the key defining themes of this Parliament for Westminster and England are utterly removed from what's going on in Scotland.
But is it, I want to bring in everybody else in just a second, but I just want to press you on this. Do you think, however, that, say, at the beginning of September, if the opinion polls suggest that David Cameron is going to be re-elected with a thumping majority, that there'll be a Conservative majority, because of that difference, and given there's only one Conservative MP in the whole of Scotland, that might actually affect the vote? And we've already heard the SNP say within the past couple of weeks, you know, David Cameron's the living embodiment of every reason why you should vote for independence.
I think it would have a profound impact on the vote. And I know that the organiser of the anti-independence campaign, the so-called Better Together campaign, Alistair Darling, also believes that that would be a massive bonus for Alex Salmond, the leader of the independence campaign, if that were to happen. I mean, that's a very big if. But that would, I think, have a more profound impact on the campaign than this very powerful coordinated currency campaign.
Marie, where do you see it? And also, I mean, there have been some parallels drawn with, you know, Germany and Greece, a big country effectively, I know you love this, a big country effectively dictating economic policy for another one which is supposedly independent, but because of the currency link-up, it isn't.
Well, obviously, the fact that the euro has turned out to be such a huge problem in Europe affects this whole discussion a lot. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, do you think that England and Scotland in a currency union is very different from the whole of the EU? And there has been an argument that if it came to it, and if Scotland voted for independence, Westminster would not say no to the pound. I mean, Scotland is England's second largest trading partner. Would it make any sense to have a different currency across the border? How would that work?
Could I just say in 10 seconds? I think then they wouldn't have real independence. You know, I mean, once you concede that the Bank of England will determine your interest rates, you then, in effect, which is what's happening in Europe, have to harmonise quite a lot of other things as well. So they've already got separation of powers in a lot of key areas. So what more would they get if they were allied to the English currency. And also, I don't think it's entirely bluster. I think there would be real resistance from the English-based politicians for there to be a joint currency. Yeah. I don't think it's entirely bluster.
In some ways, you're right. On the other hand, it seems to me this Scottish independence is more about politics. It's about national identity rather than economics. I know economy matters. Economy probably is the biggest factor swinging the votes here. But come to the push and shove, at the end of the day, it's about Scotland being a different country. And in a way, if I think back to, in China's history, and when there were these moments that a massive country that had different pockets of minorities and different ethnic groups and provinces, countries wanted independence. And a lot of that, technically, you can argue a lot about how to do currency, how to manage the economy. At the end, the vote or the decision came to who we are, what we want to be. I think that will matter more at the end of the day.
And also, looking back 100 years to what happened in Ireland, you could say Ireland perhaps would have been better off in financial terms, certainly in the short term, remaining part of the United Kingdom. That was certainly not the way Irish people wanted it. So I mean, in other words, it's the heart issue rather than
and the vote will be a heart vote in the end. I mean, Nate Silver, who calls all political campaigns correctly, has said there's absolutely no chance that the Scots will vote for independence, but he doesn't spend much time there, is my guess, and he's just looking at a spreadsheet. I think this is a heart vote. I think that someone on my Twitter feed said it's a shame that George Osborne looks like a general staff officer on Butcher Cumberland's general staff, and he goes up there and he's making a speech, and you can just feel people, even people who are conservative voters, potentially saying, you just don't understand, go away. The reason this has got to this point, let's be clear, is that over the last 35 years, this country has become, at least in terms of its politics and its economic base, so London and home counties centric that the Scots are up there and they say, who are these people? And what right do they have, this is the emotional part, to say anything about the way I live? Now, they do have a tremendous amount of autonomy. The best thing that David Cameron, from his point of view, has ever done as Prime Minister was get Devo Max off the table. If Alex Salmond's choice of Devo Max, the maximum devolution, had been left in as a third option in this vote, that would have carried the day.
I think many people would think that. Yeah.
So, it will come down to a hard vote, but there are other things. I was in Middlesbrough last year doing a piece on inequality, and throughout the Northeast, only in a half jest, you hear people saying, well, if the Scots vote for independence, I hope they take us with them. Tyneside, Teesside, the wasteland of so much of the northern part of England.
That's a really good point, because the people, I've had the same conversations actually in Newcastle and elsewhere, and people feel very, very remote from the London media, the London government, effectively, in the same way as some Scots do.
And at one level, it should be a warning, but I don't know that anyone in Westminster is heeding it, about just how split this country, and it's such a small country. I mean, I'm from America, so I have a sense of what scale can be. How can a place as geographically compact as the island of Britain be so very different between this part where we're talking and the rest, the bulk of the country?
It's not just geography, is it? It's politics, which is very important to mention. It's one reason why, although it makes sense for them, it's painful to see the Labour Party lining up, with Cameron and Danny Alexander at this moment, which is that Scotland still holds to the old British welfare system in a way that really, since Thatcher, then Blair, and now Cameron, England has
I would say
been leaving
communitarian.
behind.
Welfare has become such a pejorative
Call it
term.
social security, not the American sense of welfare.
That's certainly a very strong argument that's being made by Alex Salmond and others, which is we are holding to the post-1945
Yes, that we are actually what Britain used to be, or we want,
Just in 10 seconds, when the North East had a chance for voting for their own regional assembly, the vote in the referendum was slaughtered. they voted no by a massive, massive majority. And it's worth remembering the polls still in Scotland suggest that independence will lose. Yet if it is based on emotion and heart, given that Scotland, as we've been discussing, is a separate country, it would win. Now, it still might, but I think, you know, there is
one other
final
card,
thought on this,
one other card, and I know David Cameron doesn't want to play it, but the leadership of the European Union we were speaking about earlier desperately does not want this, because they don't want to contemplate Catalonia going independent. Any number of regions in Italy, or in France for that matter, saying, well, you know what? The heck with Paris, or the heck with Madrid, we want our own. So those guns have yet to be wheeled out.
OK, let's move on, because Britain's senior